everyone! So today I thought I will share with you an alternative way of having watercolor effect without using watercolor. So if you love watercolor, everything watercolor, you might as well want to try and use other mediums that will help you to achieve that watercolor effect. So the washes, the blends, the flow. However, it will add something to it, a little bit more texture and a variety to play with, so that you can maybe expand your knowledge in watercolor and start adding a few other mediums. So here I've done a little page last night, and this gave me the idea for today's video. And before I continue any further, I thought I'll just share the process how I do it. So for instance, these flowers right here, they have, I mean, if I didn't tell you that they were not watercolor, would you think that they weren't? So in fact, I have used the Neocolor IIs, which are water soluble, and you might remember them in another tray, so I've now moved them here because it's actually more compact, and this way I can keep it easier on the desk. It doesn't take up that much space. And I tried all sorts of different ways of presenting my Neocolor IIs, and I realized that when they're in the open, for me to see the color range like that, I use them with more joy. Also, I have taken off some of the paper and sharpened most of them, because again, this is something that I like doing. So once I sharpen them, just using a regular sharpener, but I wouldn't use your best sharpener. I would use maybe a cheap one, you know, the cheapest that you have will do a great job on these, no problem whatsoever. Yeah, and with the fine tip, I use them just like I would do with a pencil. So I like to add detail, and I can go into smaller areas and create little marks and things like that to give it that petal effect. And so that's why I like to use them this way. So these are my Neocolor ones, which I'm not really getting on with them. They really are like a bit like working with children's art supplies, so I'm not getting on with those. But the Neocolor IIs, they're stunning and beautiful, and I think a couple more colors would be a good addition here. So these are these. Then the hibiscus flower here at the bottom, I have done it. I'm trying to see what would be a best way of showing you. I've got sunlight coming in now. So the hibiscus I've done with the watercolor pencils. So both are by Caran. These are Neocolor IIs, and these are the Museum Aquarelles, and they're like super artist grade pencils, the best that are out there. The pigment is literally like watercolor, very, very saturated, gorgeous product. So this is what I've done here. And again, you know, apart from this area where I intentionally used pencil marks here, I don't think around the petal area you'd be necessarily able to detect that they're not watercolor. So you can see this is in fact the same color here and onto the petal, and it's very watered out and kind of blends lovely. So I was going to show you how I create that effect, and all you need to think is about shadows, about highlights, where you want them, and pick the colors accordingly. So for instance, in this floral cluster, I went for quite a few colors. So I think I went for these 5 colors. So these right here. And I used them accordingly to create sort of depth to the flower. And then I left my highlights as well. So let's continue with the leaves today, just to show you exactly what I do. So far, this is exactly how I start. I use the medium, whichever medium I go for, in this case, the pencils. And I just went in with the darkest color in the areas where I'd like it to be the darkest and deepest. So this is a dark sap green, and then into just the middle I added some Payne's gray. Then I'm going to add another color, just as a little pop of colors. If you can see on these petals right here, there's some areas which have a little bit more yellow, which is this color here, which is fast orange. So I added that color onto the petals in these areas. So that creates a little pop of color. And in a similar way, I'm going to try and do this to the leaves. My collection of Museum Aquarelles is quite modest. I picked out colors that I sort of thought I would like to use rather than buying everything under the roof. And there could be a few more colors easily added. But anyways, so now I'm just going to add a bit of this color in some areas. You don't need to be that specific because you will be using water to blend it all out. But you can see immediately it's starting to look interesting. So now we're going to use some water. And for this specific style, I actually don't mind using one of those water brushes because I find them very, very convenient. So also you'll need some sort of a rag, or in my case I will be using a napkin. And make sure there is not too much water, and whatever there is on the nib, it's not dirty from the previous color. So I'm going to activate the color now. Starting at the darkest point, making sure that it's kind of blended with the water. And then if I feel like there's too much water, I'm going to dab it onto the napkin and basically pull out the color like so. So again, blending the darkest color and then blending the two colors together, and we're creating a watercolor effect. Remember, there is a bit of that Payne's gray, so if you wanted to mute the colors, you can mute them a bit more. If you ever want to lift the color, so for instance you added too much of the dark, what you would need to do in that case is immediately use a napkin or something to dab it off with, and that way you can quickly create a highlight again, so for instance like so, and you would lift the color. But you need to make sure to do that when it's still quite wet. You might find using a brush pen a bit tricky, especially if you're a beginner, because controlling the water is not as easy as when you're using a jar of water and just a regular brush. You have more control over there, or you'd find it easier, I would imagine. Whereas with some of those brushes, the water just flows out uncontrollably. Sometimes it stops, but it's something you get used to. The benefit of using water brushes is you can easily take this to, like, I don't know, to the sofa when you're watching TV with your family or something, and just do your thing without needing water, jar and brush and all of that, so you can easily continue. So for instance, what I do is I create these pencil marks like what you saw in the beginning, and then at that stage I take it to like another room with the water brush, and that's it. Don't need to do that much more. So there you go, just blending it. So very simply done, but it's quite enjoyable. You're not using too much water, that's the other benefit. So the paper doesn't crinkle as much. This particular paper, I mentioned it in my other video, is 140 GSM, and it's great for pencils. I love drawing with it. It's just, yeah, sort of acrylics and acrylic inks, heavy body acrylic and watercolor, but with a lot of water, it just starts to really crinkle. And for me, when I started using this sketchbook, I had something in mind, which is mostly not really caring about it, but I have to say I am bothered by using pencils and then needing to have these separators. I thought first of all I will use separators between the pages. So for instance, with colored pencils, I like to press quite hard, and therefore, you know, it all would be just transferring to the other side, and then you end up with this look, which I really absolutely cannot stand. It bothers me to the extent where I'm like become very cautious, and that really goes in the way of creating. It kind of disrupts the flow, the creative flow. And so having thought about it, although I love this presentation of having 2 pages, I don't like the crinkling, so probably the best thing I could do is botanical art just on 1 page. I mean, potentially what I could do is leave this page blank as I planned, and then just use it for drawing with fountain pen. That way I'm not going to press that hard, and I'm not going to pick up anything that would have been on the other page, if that makes sense. That way at least I would have a full presentation and just use color, whatever medium, on this page. So I think that would work. That's what you can do if you have the same situation when you have a thinner paper but you like drawing. You could just use color, but you know, with a little bit of water, not too much. The colors that I used for the petals for the hibiscus flower, I might show you up here. So what I've done is I've used the darkest, which is the plum dark. So let me just draw out the petal for you so I can show you what I did here. So imagine this being the hibiscus petal, like so, and then we'll have curling of the petal. So I've got the darkest one being dark plum. So the darkest line was beneath the curling line, because in effect we're suggesting a shadow here. So once the petal curls, right beneath it we create a shadow, right? Then we can't emphasize a shadow right above it because that would blend in. So we need a slightly lighter color, but not too light because it will be looking a bit odd. So I'm using Crimson Aubergine, which is similar color in tone, but it's not the same thing. And then we have this color here, which is this peach, and it's called Apricot. So that I'm putting right below it, and the rest I'm leaving white of the paper because we don't want it to be like solid color. We want it to be a bit of a highlight there. With the last color, the Anthraquinite Pink, I think I used it into the center. So what I've done is, again, I've done dark plum into the center. And this is where I had this sort of intentional pencil marks. And then blending in a little bit of this pink and a bit of this again. So the crimson aubergine. So that's it. And then you will notice that I have taken the crimson aubergine along the side of the petal. So now what I'm going to do is use the tip of my brush to go right into the back of the petal. And now I'm going to blend it out like so and pull it in. Thinking about the highlight, where would I like the highlight to remain? So, for instance, here is the darkest part. I'm going to slow down with my brush and just pull out the darkest area like so. Let it blend in a little bit and then blend it out. And then on the other side of the leaf here, same thing. First slowing down, then blending and maintaining the highlight at the bottom. And you can always lift it like that. If you wanted to darken it still or deepen it still, you could work with a more fine tip of the pencil. Generally, it would be a good idea to wait for it to be completely dry, or vice versa. Dip the tip of the pencil into water, and that's when you will get the darkest result. So I'm going to make the tip wet, and then that literally will be like pure pigment. So I'll show you here as an example. We've got dry pencil, and now I'm going to wet it. It's not enough. It becomes like paint. There we go. You can see. And then I could show you as an example, once you start adding water, you can intensify it. Or you could also completely take the mark out. I mean, if you don't press as hard as I do with pencils, you can just, you know, pretty much erase the pencil line completely. So here I can see there's, the colors are not properly blended. So for instance, the apricot is a little bit patchy. So I'm just going to go back in with the brush, and with the tip of the bristles just move them around and smoothen them and blend them a little bit more, and that's it. So that's how you can use the pencils, the watercolor pencils, to create watercolor effect without using too much water. Just before I go, I realized always a good thing to do is create a little reminder of the colors that you have used. So just a little swatch window right here. You can do swatches in different ways. You can do them sort of scribbly and quick, or you can make them look fancy as well, which I will show you in a minute. So what I would do is just pull out the pencil to show us a nice range of dark and light. And then of course above it or below it or whichever way, write down what these pencils are. Another thing that you might want to do to have it look nice is have some sort of roller stamp, I think it's called. So today is, goodness, what is it today? 3rd. I believe it's the 3rd. Yes, it's the 3rd of February. And I don't do it on every single page, but I try to do it as often as I can, because when I flip through my art sketchbooks, it gives me a good indication how it was progressing, in which intervals, because I don't work in the same sketchbook until I finish it. I have at least, I don't know, 5, 7 sketchbooks. Oh, let me know in the comments if you want to have a quick look at all of the sketchbooks that I am currently working in. I think that would be a fun video, because there is quite a few and they're all different. I have a sketchbook for patterns, for botanicals, then sort of like mixed media, swatches, markers, the Daniel Smith Primatag that I started the series a while ago. I mean, I've got quite a few, so I think it'd be good to revisit all of those sketchbooks in a video. So coming back to having swatches look neat, what I have here is I'm going to use this round element on one of my acrylic blocks, which is available together with the color palette on my Etsy Alyona Creates. And you can see there's a number of different elements to do fun, pretty, cute looking swatches, as well as exploring the color wheel and the color theory of your primaries and all the other good stuff. So here is just a quick example of things you can do, but there is more. There's loads of tutorials and videos on my channel for some inspiration. But I'm going to show you how to use this circle. So you can see I've got a small circle and like a slightly bigger and quite a big one. For different purposes, you can use this big circle to divide the color wheel, but these tiny ones I generally like to use. Well, I have an open sketchbook that I can quickly show you. So the small one I used here to create these daisy color wheels, another thing you can do with that stamp set. Today I'm going to show you, for pencils particularly, this little circle is so good. So what you will need is some sort of a ruler, and in my case you might want to use a black. In fact, let me show you the difference, what it looks like in black and how it looks like in a nude color. So I always like to use nude color, so think about it that way. You're going to stamp it just above the line, and you're going to do that for all the other colors. And that will look really neat. And then just above we'll do the black one, and you will see the difference. So the black one is permanent ink. This one is not permanent, but it's nude, which means you're not going to see it very well. So it's not going to distract from the actual colors. So here we go. Let's say roughly about here. So same thing. It's crisper when you do it with black. Some people prefer black ink. It just, you know, it looks crisper. So it's really just what you like. There's nothing wrong with using one or the other. In fact, sometimes my mood changes, although most times it definitely would be nude. Okay, so now to make these swatches look neat, all we need to do is just swatch them. So we're going to do the same thing as we did before. So I'm going to stay within the lines and do like half a circle. Oh no, that's the wrong color. No, it's supposed to be the dark one. So we're staying within the circle, doing half a circle roughly. I'm going to do the same here. And then next one. And next one. And finally the lightest color. These little circles are great for when you want to create a limited color palette, so you can quickly stamp them, play around with swatching colors and, you know, figuring out what you like. Okay, so I'm going to go now into the water part. So making sure one of the side of the circles stays light. Okay, so these are the black ones, and now we're going to go into the nude ink. With the nude ink, I could literally go over the line, it doesn't really matter. And what you will see, the way it looks like, it's more painted. So it looks like I didn't stamp anything there. The advantage of stamping is, of course, that you can create a straight line of swatches, which it would be difficult to do just on your own without any help. So that's why I like to use the nude ink. Not because I want it to look like a stamped image, but because I want it to be a help to have things look neat, more organized, tidy, but not necessarily do I want, you know, to know that I had to stamp those. So either way, looks great. Then of course I would go ahead and title them, but just to give you an example of what it looks like. So, you know, it looks great either way. It's I think this would be great for journaling. This is more for like artist sketchbook, where it's kind of just helping, but not fully obvious what we've done there. That is it for today. A bit longer than I expected, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless, and I will see you next time.